he does med scans and find out they're completely sexless. Ken doll downstairs. There is nothing going on. And he's like, how the do these reproduce? And I'm like, Paul, they talked about death and true death, and I really think you need to start putting these 2 and 2 together because I think things are going to get more sinister, buddy, and you're not prepared. And he was not. Welcome, everyone. It's your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension, and I am your host today, Maria, with my lovely co-host,
William.
I meant Katie, but we'll take it.
I am lovely. We're gender equal here.
The book we're reading this week is actually not an entire book. We decided to read one of my favorite books that I've read in the past year, Hyperion, but we're separating it into the 5 tales that are told. That's also how the book's organized. So every once in a while, we'll read one of the tales and then talk about it. And today is The Priest's Tale. So I have a lot of feelings about this because I love this book, and of the Hyperion Cantos, this is by far my favorite book. I then like the second one, and then the third and fourth I like but do not love. And I was really excited to share this book with Katie and Will because it's wild and amazing and a great piece of sci-fi, and because each tale has kind of its own flavor. And The Priest's Tale was one of my favorites, so I'm really excited to get their feedback on it. So guys, tell me, how did we feel? General opinions about this book.
I was really impressed. The other book we were reading at the same time was The Savior Sister.
Oh, don't remind me.
Whose video will probably come out either right before this or right after. And I think what I said in that video is it's a bit like if someone had tried to convince me that a cricket and an elephant were both mammals. Like, Hyperion is so much better than that piece of flaming garbage that it does not belong in the same mode of art and communication. So yeah, I really loved it. I've read Dan Simmons before. I read his book Ilium and the sequel, which are like a little bit weirder. This was a lot more solid. Specifically, I thought that the tale in it, the Priest's Tale, which is the one we're going to discuss, because it's set up, like Maria said, like the Canterbury Tales, with one person telling a story each night. I thought it was fantastically creepy and depressing, and I thought it was really good in that way. And especially after me and Katie read the Slasher Girls and Monster Boys horror anthology, I was actually just listening to it a minute ago, and we were talking about how short stories have difficulty telling horror, or like I was questioning if they could tell horror well, or what even horror in prose would look like. And damn, did this book deliver.
I think one of the most successful things was the build-up and how tenuous it became. It started with small little issues and small complications. And as his adventure off to find the tribal people gets closer and closer, the issues become bigger and bigger until the point where it's truly, truly overwhelmingly horrific. So it is like the building up of like a horror, like that instrument they use where it's like,
yes.
And it's almost like you can almost imagine, that editing style that they use on what's the guy, Ari Aster?
I was literally thinking this story gives me Hereditary vibes.
Yeah. So like you could almost imagine it being filmed in like a dark blue-gray like filter, and him going up and doing this whole shebang, and then it goes quiet when it goes into, and we'll get into it later, but when it goes into the young priest coming to find the elder priest, and you can almost imagine in that moment the music just blaring into it, just being like that.
The visuals are so crisp and clear. Like, I still have mental images. I've been kind of suspecting since we started this podcast, or really video series more, that my memory is really bad because I have trouble remembering stories. I have no trouble remembering this one. I remember it perfectly. It's clear. It really is that I just have trouble remembering not very good stories. Again, some of the imagery here, I'll actually mention or quote some. It's really fantastically creepy. But Maria, why don't you take us into the plot?
Okay, guys. So this story starts, and you'll get a little bit of my reactions as I read it for the first time while I do this. The story starts from the point of view, because before we get into the priest's tale, we've got, it's structured like the Canterbury Tales. You have like an overarching story and then the individual tales that get told within it. And I went into this not realizing it was Canterbury Tales in space. Book opens with this guy who is only ever referred to as the consul, and he is on his really bougie spaceship. drinking some scotch.
Yeah, I'm imagining, like, what the heck's that actor's name? The one that's Sean Connery. I'm imagining Sean
I
Connery.
had a Daniel Craig vibe, so pretty close.
Yeah.
Both Bonds.
I'm thinking like Sean Connery in the vibe of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That's the vibe I got from him. Like that old like marksman type of vibe, a little bit of an alcoholic, sorrowful,
tired, weary sort of character. And he gets a message, and the message is from, oh my god, I'm blanking on her name.
Hillary Clinton.
She's the Hillary Clinton of, she's the head of the Senate.
I pictured her as a Yubaba figure.
Really? No, I
Yeah.
pictured her
too
kind of.
pictured her as somebody you just said that I don't know who it is.
What?
She doesn't know who you said. And she is the head of like their government, and she basically is telling the consul that you have been selected to go on a pilgrimage to the Shrike Temple, and they talk about how a bunch of the Shrike priests, as well as their database of AI. So it's not explained now. Katie and Will don't know this yet, but they have a database of AI that runs any outcome. Like they'll take a situation and run all the possible futures and find the most likely outcomes. And so the people on this pilgrimage were chosen by this AI system to be here for specific reasons that we don't know. The consul is one of them.
Yeah, and to also branch out a little bit more to the overall story, the overall setting, there are like the civilized worlds, and then there are some more far-flung worlds, and then there are these
ousters.
The ousters. And then there are some raiders who are coming in to attack this world, Hyperion, which is where these pilgrims are going toward. And the pilgrimage is specifically of people who have encountered the Shrike.
Not necessarily who've encountered the Shrike, but who have some relationship with Hyperion.
Oh, I thought it was the Shrike specifically.
No. It is not.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the really important reason, so the ousters are there, and they're coming to invade, but the reason the ousters are attacking Hyperion is because there is, and at this point in the story, it's very nebulous, not a lot of explanation, there is these time tombs, and nobody knows what's in them, but they're surrounded by these entropic fields that have kept, they're going backwards in time. Since they've been on Hyperion, they are at a different point, and so you can't really get to them, and when you do, you are in a different time place. But the entropic fields are pulling back, which means the time tombs are going to open, and whatever is in them, everyone kind of has this feeling that it is literally world changing. And the ousters are trying to get Hyperion before it opens. The actual government system is like, no, not today, ousters. And so they're trying to they've put together this group of pilgrims who all have a relationship with Hyperion, not that anyone knows what the other one's is, to try get to the time tombs, and somehow the AI thing thinks that these group of people will help make sure the ousters don't get there first.
And so one of the things I really like, and this is something I really liked in Ilium, which was the other Dan Simmons book I read, is the world building is so cool and so mysterious. Like, it feeds you information at just the correct amount to make you kind of understand what's going on, but still want to know more and more understanding. So the ship that comes to pick up the consul to take him to Hyperion is a big tree of a religious order, and they have like trapped singularities for gravity, and you're like, this is so cool. Like, how does this work? It's bizarre, but you're like, okay, I want to know more of the mystery of this world. While at the same time, the world feels very real and grounded through details, which is something that from the Savior series we know is important to do. And it just feeds you information at a really good rate, I thought.
I thought actually on my first read, and I know Katie had an experience closer to yours, but I was overwhelmed with this first part before the tale kicked in, because there was a lot of words coming at you, like fat line, Tau Ceti Center, Maina Gladstone. Bitch, I remembered her name. Ayo. Go, Katie.
Yeah, no, I felt the same way. The prologue was super overwhelming, and I thought it was dry because there were so many made-up words. Well, not made-up words, but like, made-up combinations of things of what they're supposed, all the stuff they're supposed to represent. And I remembered having a keen sense of a flashback to reading Wheel of Time, the first 10 pages, and how I gave up. It's because it's a lot of words. I felt that way. But then once the chapter started in True and they were on the ship and everything, I basically was in tune with the way things were going. And also a lot of the words represent obvious things of what they probably do. So the tree ship thing that they're in,
The Yggdrasil.
imagine it's essentially like a giant tree.
Espess.
But with like these little pod things that have swirly openings that go and they're into like a grassy little, like, imagine a little Easter egg like inside where they're just, that's what I imagined. Like,
I imagined it like Lothlorien in Lord of the Rings. Or
yes,
not.
exactly.
So the pilgrimage gets started. One thing Maina Gladstone mentions in her message that she gave the consul was there is a traitor among these pilgrims. And you also, it has to be prime numbers. So there's 7 pilgrims. One of these pilgrims is a traitor. And so you get to the tree ship, the consul ends up meeting everyone, and you have this interesting cast of characters. Originally, there's just 6 people sitting, and they're like, who's the 7th? And then the voice of the tree, Het Mestine, who is the captain of the tree ship Yggdrasil, is the other. I'm missing someone.
The priest. You're missing
the priest. Father Lenar Hoyt, who is a young Catholic priest who looks ill. Because you get a lot of the narration in the not stories through the consul's point of view. And he looks at Lenar Hoyt and he's like, this guy don't look too good. He's got the sheen of a man who's a little sick.
I really liked the way that all the characters are kind of cynical and a little tired and depressed, and like there's a very nice atmosphere of like they're going on this pilgrimage, but like none of them think this is a great idea, none of them think this is going well. There's like a nice atmosphere there and they bounce off each other well.
Yep.
I didn't really remember who everyone was, but I'm sure as the novel goes on we'll get it. And the other thing to mention about the priest is that he is a Catholic priest, but the Catholic Church is like basically like
dying,
a polyp of what it once was. And that's one of the big things we'll talk about in the story, is the idea that the church is losing its grasp on humanity.
So the majority of this scene takes place during their dinner, which has multiple courses. And during this meal, tensions arise. Some people are annoyed. And eventually they're like, why is everyone here? What are we doing? And nobody wants to say anything. And Weintraub, who is a scholar, says there's obviously something here to be known that none of us on our own know. And I think it would be worth sharing our stories to bring some clarity to the situation. And everybody's like, no, I don't want to. And the consul's like, I definitely don't want to. And they decide, they put it to a vote, and the yeses have it. Every night at dinner, they're going to share a story. And it was at this point, because again, prior to this, I had no idea that this was Canterbury Tales in the Spes. And I heard that and I was like, I'm officially in love with this book. You better deliver on some solid-ass stories, Simmons. They can't figure out who's going to go first, so Martin Silenus takes a hat, puts names in it, and everybody picks a number. And the consul gets the last one, and he's like, okay, I'll play along, because, who knows? Will we be alive by then? Maybe we could have talked each other out of doing this. It's fine. And so they pick their order, and the first tale is the priest's tale. And Father Lenar Hoyt is like, I have to go get something if I'm going to tell my tale. And everybody's like, what are you going to get? You shouldn't have to read something. You should tell us. And he's like, no.
Yeah. And then he brings back like blood spattered, leather bound, like notebooks, which, as you can imagine, is very abnormal in space colony place things.
And he's like, these are the notebooks of Father Paul Duray, who was a Jesuit priest. And the story starts from Father Hoyt's point of view, where he is escorting Paul Duray to exile on Hyperion. Duray had done something on a previous planet he was stationed on called Armagast, and there was a controversy, and he is basically just being exiled to live his life on Hyperion. Hoyt is like, what are you gonna do? Like, what's your plan, buddy?
Yeah, and then he's like, yeah, I'm gonna go out in the middle of nowhere and find these, like, essentially, like, imagine deep in the Amazon, every cliche horror movie of, like, the natives there. And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna set my sights on that place, and I'm gonna go retire there, essentially.
And study them, and just learn things. And Hoyt is immediately like, through this conversation, you get the use that everyone has these comm links that they're able to like pause and look stuff up in their head. Hoyt does it a couple times during their conversation, and he looks up the Bikura, which is the name of this group that Duray wants to go study, and he's like, the Bikura are a myth. Like, they don't really exist. Paul Duray is like, I don't know, maybe they do. I'm gonna go find out. And he is very resigned to his fate. Hoyt brings him to Hyperion and just leaves him and gets back on his ship to go home. This is where the story really picks up, because this is 100% Father Paul Duray's story and not Father Hoyt's. Duray lands on this planet, and you get this protagonist who is weary, sad, and has lost his faith. He has his one really good friend, Edward. So he had a priest friend. And the first time I read this, I thought there was a little, like, gay.
I picked up on that too.
I wanted to believe it because I know it would bother Dan Simmons, whose politics were somewhat regressive. So I choose in my head to believe that the priests were like habit brothers, you know what I mean?
The way he talks
yeah.
about him, it's so sweet and intimate and beautiful. Like
It's
literally
tender.
It's tender. Literally, there's a point where he says, if I just knew you were still alive. Because at this point, being on the ship going to Hyperion, I have to explain something. So there is the web worlds. The web worlds are all connected by farcasters. Farcasters are these portal. Think Stargate. You walk through, you've gone hundreds of light years, and you're immediately somewhere else. So you have lost, even though you've traveled a really long time, you've lost no time of your life, and you're immediately able to go from point A to point B. The web worlds are all connected by these farcasters, so you can go across the web world in a second if you're at a farcaster. Now, Hyperion is not, even though it's part of this government system, it's considered a outback world, and it is not connected by farcaster. Because of the ouster threat, they're going to build a farcaster, but it hadn't been built yet. So all of the pilgrims going to Hyperion are going to develop a time debt, I think, of about 7 years. And Father Paul Duray, also going to Hyperion, got a time debt of, I think, about 7 years. So he doesn't even know if Edward is still alive. Edward could be dead by this point. By the time he got to Hyperion, it was 7 years later on the Catholic homeworld of Pacham. He's just sad and lost. He's lost his faith, and the reason he got in trouble on Armagast, and you learn through this, is he saw things while he was excavating.
You have a master's in literature, right?
I do. He wanted to interpret it in a way that would imply God. So, like, almost like tangible proof that God did exist. He did that because he needed his faith affirmed, and he wanted to get the church revitalized. And so this is why he got exiled. He's going to study the Bikura to just kind of live out his life. He doesn't expect much from it. And his entire trip there is really just sad. Like, Hyperion is a backwater world. There's a lot of, like, it's dirty. At one point, he gets shot. No, he sees someone else get shot, and he, like, administers the last rites, and then he gets sick. And I really liked the sequence where he was sick, because he would write in his journal, and it was basically nonsense. And that's where you find out that, like, there's a woman that appeared while he was sick, and she tempted him.
Like having nipples. It was kind of an odd description.
God, I really wanted you to be a happy gay priest.
Oh my gosh, no, hush, he can be bisexual.
Oh,
and besides,
he can be bisexual. You're right.
You know?
That's my new headcanon.
Hashtag no bi erasure.
Paul Duray is bi.
Anyway, him and his porter essentially make it through a forest of what are essentially like lightning rod trees. I wasn't
They
quite
look
sure
like Edison bulbs, I think.
Yes, that's how they...
And basically what happens is that there's a fire or a lightning storm so severe in this area that all the trees and plants are adapted to burn down and then come back up, except for these trees, which will like catch the lightning. And so getting through it is like monsoon season, but times 100. Like, you just cannot get through it without the right technology. So him and a porter go through during the like okay season, and they make it to a cave. And they chill out there for a while, and they set up camp, and he's kind of friends with the native porter. They can't find the Makari?
Bikura.
But they're chilling. And then one day he wakes up, and his porter has been brutally murdered, and there's a bunch of Bakura standing around him looking at him. Did I skip something?
Yes. What actually happens is there's no one there. He had had a dream of hands upon him, and he had thought it had just been a dream until he had woken up and found the porter dead. And then he went on like this individual like evasion hunt of trying to figure out what was going on and how he died and stuff. And so then when he made his way to another part, I think it was along the crag or something like that. That's where he saw actual huts of the Bikura. Then they were like, yo, what's up?
Then when he went back to his camp, they were there, and they were like, hello, are you of the cross?
We should state the Bakura are not natives to the planet, despite kind of being coded as such. What happened is there was a siege ship. They were supposed to populate the planet, but the ship crashed. And these are the settlers, or descendants of the settlers of them. And so he describes them as very dumb. Like, they look dumb, they look very dull, they talk dumb, can't really conceive of certain things, and they call themselves the 7, I believe.
10, because there's 70 of them.
Yeah, 10, and that's like all of them.
And there's only ever 10. He uses specifically Down syndrome as a descriptor.
Yeah, a little problematic.
They all look exactly the same. You can differentiate between them, but for the most part, they all look very, very similar. They wear these robes. His immediate thought is childlike Jesuit priests.
They don't even have names to differentiate themselves, he learns.
Which kind of makes sense if you think of the nematode stuff of it just becoming...
Spoiler, we'll figure it, we'll get there.
Don't listen to Katie.
I'm peeking. No. I'm opening the curtain a little. I'm teasing with like a nipple and put it closed.
This explains a lot.
Anyway, and he starts studying them, and they're really like not helpful in his studies. Like, he's asking them questions, he's not getting a lot of answers. He brought all this equipment, he wants to put them through med scanners, and they refuse to go through med scanners. He realizes they have really strict like nudity guidelines, like even when they go to the bathroom he doesn't ever see them bathe, and they have a really set time schedule. So like when they originally bring him to the village, they were like, we can go to sleep now. And it's literally the middle of the day. And he's like, nah, this is wake time. And all of them just go to sleep for a couple of hours. And then they wake up and then they scavenge. And then right around sunset, so the Bikura live on the edge of this craggy ravine. So it's really, really deep. And so much so that when the wind goes through, it makes noise. Like he compares it to an organ a lot. So this place is beautiful.
So think of screaming almost too in the worst or in the least beatific moments.
A long, low wail.
They just descend down the side of the cliff, and they're like, you stay here. And he's like, this is kind of weird. One day he asked them, like, what would happen if I followed you? And then they've mentioned before, like, when they killed his friend, they were like, he died the true death. And he's like, what do you mean the true death? When he says, well, what would you do if I went down after you? They were like, oh, well, we'd kill you. And then if you did it again, we would kill you again. And you're like, immediately, as a reader, you're like, well, that's not normal.
I don't think that's just a cultural jargon.
The other thing that's important is that it's insinuated that they let him live and not his porter because he is of the cross. But then they also say that they are of the cruciform, and the cross and the cruciform are like not the same, but he doesn't quite understand the difference.
So it's you follow the cross and then you are of the cross. And they say he follows the cross, and he's like, I follow the cross.
And so that one night where the camp had been invaded and his porter was killed, they had looked upon his chest and seen the crosses from his crucifix. And so that is important detail.
That's why they let him live. And so as he's there, he also starts picking up other things. Like, he realizes they're all the same age and there's no children. And he's like, how do these people reproduce? Where are the babies? They can't all just die at the same time. And what they tell him is that there's always a 10. There was always 70 of them. And he's like, do they kill the old one? Like, a baby's being born. One of us has to die. He's trying to figure it out. And you as a reader are consistently, as he keeps coming up to all these weird idiosyncrasies of the 10, this pit just starts developing in your stomach.
It's both really creepy and kind of hilarious at the same time because they're so stupid. But at the same time, like Maria said, there's this unsettledness to it of like, it's actually interesting thinking back on it because like now I know how much creepier it actually is what they were doing. But even then you're like, oh, this is not going to a good place.
Yeah, and so it just starts building, and eventually he decides one day while they're out foraging, because they forage always for a couple of hours, so they're very cyclical. They don't have water skins. They will literally go to the river, get water, come back. He's the only one that carries water. And so they don't use fire to eat. So like if they ever do eat meat, it's because an animal happened to fall into their lap. They don't actually hunt. They just scavenge so originally he thinks they're vegetarians, but they're not. Eventually he sees one of them snacking on a baby arboreal. Eventually he decides when they're scavenging one day, he's going to go down the cleft and he's going to see what's down there. This is a diary. So it'll be like day something. He'll give you the thing and then nothing. And then it'll pick up on a new day. And when it picks up on a new day, we get a new Father Paul Duray. He is ecstatic. He's like, thank you, God, for showing me this. Thank you. I need to share this with everyone, the miracle I have seen. And he's just like, the faith he has lost, the tired man is gone, and we are given a glimpse of a man who has refound his faith. And he basically says, I'm going to gather up my stuff, and I am going to, because he took his camera and stuff down into the cleft with him. He's like, I'm going to show the world this. I'll go through the forest myself, the flame forest. I'll do it. I need to show the world this. And then the next entry is him being like, so I realized yesterday I never actually told you what I saw. So let me describe it. And he goes down the cleft, and it's just a bunch of vines that are almost like ladders that he has to like scale his way down. And then there's a bunch of steps. And the steps lead to a massive carved, he calls it a basilica, where it's just this massive inside hollowed out. And in the middle of it is a giant cross, set with gems, rubies, diamonds, just glimmering. And as the sun sets, like the light is being picked up from it, and it casts everything in a glow. And he's like, oh my God, Christianity. Because his whole point was that if you could prove that Christianity had sprung up on a world thousands of years before humans have ever got like evidence of God or Christian symbolism, then it would prove God exists. And for him in this moment, as a man searching for a sign, he just takes it. He's like, oh my God, this is it. This is all the proof I was looking for. God is here. God is good. He's thrilled. And he goes back up happy and just elated in this discovery he's made. And things go downhill. So he's getting ready. He goes to take a bath. And while he's bathing, he's taken off his shirt. And so now his chest is bare. And one of the Bakura come stare at him super wide-eyed, like just wide-eyed. He thinks it's because of their nudity issue. What he doesn't know is this Bakura, who I think was Delta, I don't remember, runs back to the rest of the Bakura. And when he gets there, they're having this conversation about how he is not of the cross, but he follows the way of the cruciform, but he's not of the cross, but he follows the way of the cross. And they're just having this weird circular conversation.
Logical error.
And he's like, I'm gonna dip. And they're like, no. They burn all of his stuff, like just all of it. And then he realizes, oh, they do use fire, but only in certain situations. And basically the head of the Bakura, Alpha, comes to him and says, so you are not of the cross, but you follow the way of the cruciform, so we are going to fix this. Duray is like, what? How? And they were like, we're going to make you of the cruciform. And so they forcibly take him on this long trek down the crags, past the basilica, steps and steps and steps and steps and steps, until they get to what would be like sea level, ground level. And then they start into the earth, and one of the things you learned about Hyperion earlier is this is one of the only worlds that does not have tectonics. Like in the known world of the world web, there's like 4 or 5 that don't have tectonics. A few of the ones that don't have tectonics are what are called labyrinthian worlds, where underneath their surface, it's all labyrinths. And Hyperion is one of the labyrinthian worlds, and he realizes they are about to go into the labyrinth. And previously, people have tried to get in, but have never been able to break into, like other research parties and people who have been colonizing Hyperion for the past 200 years have not been able to get into the labyrinth. And he's going in, and he gets in, and the walls are aglow with these crosses, these little, like, on the rock walls. It's just covered in these glowing little rock crossy thing. And I almost imagine them a little fuzzy. I don't know if they're described that way or if that's just how I've got them in my head.
Bioluminescent is kind of how I thought of it.
I imagine them like starfish.
Yes,
Bioluminescent
that's
starfish.
exactly the way I
That's
saw
very
it
cool.
too.
Just all over the walls. And as he...
I almost saw it like mold.
And then while he's there, all the Bakura kneel. And this is the first glimpse we get of this character that was mentioned a bunch of times. And like I said, we're on a Shrike pilgrimage, guys. And the Shrike is this creature that is around the time tombs of Hyperion.
The labyrinths too. We have to make that connection.
Well, okay, he can travel anywhere in the universe, but he mostly sticks around on Hyperion.
And he's very often around the time tombs and his giant tree of pain. But currently, for like the past few hundred years, he's been stuck, like just within the time tombs themselves. The other scary thing that's happening that launched this was that the entropic fields were expanding, and so the Shrike could go and cause chaos well past the time tombs.
And so what we should explain about the Shrike is he's basically if the Iron Throne in Game of Thrones was a large, scary monster. He is Blades. That's what he is. He is this alien thing that is just they call him the Shrike because the Shrike impales animals on thorns. And he is just that. He is just like blades on blades on blades. And we figure this out, I think, later, but like he is basically unstoppable. He can kill anything he wants. He's just large and imposing and cool.
I just think of like the original Terminator, you know, the evil one where it's like
You mean the second one where can turn into liquid metal?
Oh, is that the second one?
Yeah.
What's the
Nerd
first
up.
one?
As a reader, you have had no description about what the Shrike actually looks like at this point. So you're in this like cavern. There's these glowing crosses. Things are weird. You know shit's not going to go well for Paul DeRay at this point. And then the Shrike appears. And this is your first glimpse of him as a reader. And it is, for me at least, captivating but terrifying. And he's just this giant force, and the Bakura are kneeling to him, and you're like, DeRay's like, okay, I misunderstood the thing that they were worshipping here, because in Christianity we definitely got no Shrike that we're worshipping. And the Shrike appears, and he moves like super fast, because again, he's stepping in and out of time. And then the Shrike, as ominously and creepily as he appeared, fucks off, and it's just them. And Alpha gets up, takes one of the crosses off the walls and puts it on a leather thong and puts it around Paul's neck. And Paul's like, okay. And then they make Paul, who is at this point very tired, like exhausted, walk all the way back up all those stairs. Like he is done for the day. He's had a harrowing time. The Shrike was pretty scary. And they literally, at one point, he stops and they pick him up and just kind of drag him all the way up. And the next morning when he wakes up, he can't get the cross off. The thong has fallen off that it was on, but this thing is now...
Hold on. Who's making that noise? Is that your cat? It literally sounded like there was a small child.
It did. I thought there was a baby.
Well, what you don't know is it is a baby. It's a giant fucking baby. She weighs as much as a baby. She's very sad. She brought me a present. That's the noise she makes when she's bringing you.
Oh, it's a pumpkin.
Yeah. This is what I was given. Ooh, look, guys. Ooh, you wish you had this. That you had a present covered in
You know, when
cat hair.
cats do that, it's because they think you're a really dumb kitten who doesn't know how to hunt yet.
Yeah. Look, if she wants to take care of me, Pumpkin can take care of me. I am here for it. She's the only one. Bitch out here supporting herself. At least Pumpkin brings me presents all the time. Anyway, so he wakes up, it's attached to his skin, and he can't get it off. And he does a med scan, and it has created, like, I picture, like, mushrooms. So you have the little mushroom cap, but then it has all those filaments just going throughout. And it's just going throughout his body, into his brain, like, overnight. This has happened. And he tries to rip it off. I don't know if this is the point where he tries to rip it off or if he does the med scans on the others first.
I think he tries to rip it off a little bit at that point, but he does it later too.
And it hurts at this point, so he stops. And then he starts, like, at this point, the Bakura will kind of let him do what he wants because he is now of the cross, and he now gets it. He was like, I follow the way of the cross, but I was not of the... Now I am literally of the cross. He does med scans and find out they are completely sexless. Ken doll downstairs. There is nothing going on. And he's like, how the fuck do these motherfuckers reproduce? And I'm like, Paul, they talked about death and true death, and I really think you need to start putting these two and two together because I think things are going to get more sinister, buddy, and you're not prepared. And he was not. So he's like, how do they reproduce? And then one day he's out foraging with the guy, and the guy falls and snaps his neck. Paul's like, man, he's dead. So he brings him back to the village. Originally, he just shows the body to everyone, and they just walk off. They leave it. They don't care. And so then he's like, okay, I guess I'm going to deal with him. And he takes him and he starts getting ready to bury him. And he's digging. And they're like, what are you doing? No. So they take the body and they bring it to the basilica and lay it kind of before the cross. And then they all, like, they go to leave. And they literally turn to DeRay and say, you can leave. Like, you don't have to stay. And he's like, nah, I feel like there's something happening here that I should watch. And he looks, and the body, he describes it as almost like a reverse decomposition, but the body comes back to life as a slightly changed version of the Bakura it was before. And this guy is slightly even less talkative and dumber than he was before, but he just slots back into the Bakura life. And he realizes, oh man, this literally might be the original 70, the original 70 that landed on this planet. They got this weird nematode, and they've just been getting rebirthed.
Yeah, what he finds out is that the cross is a nematode, right, that's spread through his body, and that it will regenerate basically any amount of damage that you incur. So at this point, though, he's like, okay, I gotta get out of here. I don't have any evidence left because they burned all my pictures of the cross and whatever, but I can't do this. How horrid is it that you're just gonna get dumber and sexless having this thing in you? And it's another crisis of faith for him because, you know, Christianity and eternal life is not a good thing here. But he can't get through the forest because, first, the fire season is a problem, but second, and more importantly, the cross starts to hurt anytime he gets too far from the village. And the pain is so intense, he can't get through it. He'll black out and then find himself back at the village. Like he's crawled back there on his own. And he doesn't know what to do.
And he eventually gets so, upset, he literally tries to rip it out with a knife. And again, the pain gets so bad that he blacks out. And he realizes the cross itself does not like pain and causes him to black out so that he can't continue inflicting it. And then he concocts a plan.
There's one creepy thing before that, though,
Ooh.
which is that at one point, another of the villagers die.
Oh, yeah.
But he's died so much that, there's almost nothing of his body left. And so he's like, okay, your turn. How's this going to work out, Cross? Yeah, your move.
So what happens is, all of a sudden he realizes one of the Bikura now has 2 crosses that he's carrying. He's carrying the old person's cross, and he theorizes correctly that he's like, okay, so when this guy dies, the 2 are going to turn into 2 people. So once the body that is hosting the 2 crosses dies, 2 people are going to pop out of that. So he's basically holding it, and then it will use his body matter to make the 2 people out of it, which is also terrifying.
And also probably why they're a lot shorter, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are less each time they reincarnate. It's so creepy.
Like I said, he tries to take it off, and then he concocts a plan, and we don't know what the plan is initially, just that he is planning to get out of here. And he takes the arrestor rods, which are what is used to divert the lightning as you're going through the lightning forest. And he's like, I'm gonna win this.
And that's where Father Hoyt ends his tale at the table, and he says, oh, we don't know what happened after that. When we went to go find Father Hoyt, or not Father Hoyt, Father
DeRay.
Thank you. There wasn't anything there, or what was it?
So he said that they got there and that DeRay had succeeded. He had attached himself to one of the trees, the flame trees, and Cross didn't like the pain, so it just popped off, and he was able to actually die. He was successful. Yay, Father Paul DeRay.
And then they blew up the rest of them.
That the people he flew in with decided that this was way too weird.
Just nuked it.
They literally bombed the entire Bikura village to avoid this threat. And that's where Father Hoyt ends his tale. And everybody at the table is like, yo, dude, that was deep. And also I'd be like, how do I follow that? Man, that was a good tale. But it's just this, everybody's like, oh man, that's real shitty. And then he's like, okay guys, we're all going to retire. We're going to be landing soon and disembarking. Hetmestine, the voice of the tree, is like, we shall be taking the consul's ship down, so everybody meet there. And Hoyt's like, I'll go get my bags. And the consul meets everyone, and they're like, Father Hoyt's not here. What's up with Hoyt? And the consul's like, I'll go get him. Goes to Hoyt's room, and Hoyt is literally curled up in a ball of pain on the floor, writhing, with a syringe next to him that has malfunctioned. And the consul immediately, knows what's going on. He grabs the syringe, and Hoyt's like, oh, thank God, please give it to me. I need this ultramorph. You've got to. And he's like, I'll give it to you if you tell me the rest of the story. And you're like, oh shit, what is happening? And as a reader, you kind of know, he's in this much pain, shit's weird, and there's the rock in your stomach is sinking because you're like, oh no, tell me it got off planet. Eventually, Hoyt agrees to tell him, and basically what it was that when they went back, Hoyt actually gets to the village, and they're like, we follow the way of the cross. You follow the way of the cross. There is another. He is what do they call him? The sun something? They have this almost like a religious term that they use. And he was like, take me to that guy. I'd like to. And they take him to the edge of the flame forest. Again, they can't go too far because it physically starts to hurt. And they all bow down. And Hoyt looks up, and there is this big asbestos tree. And nailed to the top in literally a cruciform position is Father Paul DeRay. He rammed one of the arrestor rods through his feet, through his arm on the one hand, so through the tendon, like he missed all the veins, tendons, and everything. The book says like the Romans, and his other one through his hand, palm down, so this way. And he managed to curve that one. So it like held on, and it's just this burnt corpse hanging on this tree, but it's still there. And all at once, Hoyt realizes he has been here for 7 years, living, burning alive, dying, and living again. And Hoyt doesn't know how. Was the cross using the tree, like some energy from the tree? How was it fueling itself? But Hoyt clearly says like he'd been doing this in agony, but he won, because when Hoyt goes up, he climbs up, and the description of the body is terrible. No skin, the top layer of flesh has been burnt away, burning, like just, it's not great. But when he goes up and he goes to take, because Duray put all of the journals in an asbestos pouch to keep it protected around his neck. And when Hoyt goes to take the pouch, the cruciform falls away. Tendrils dragging out of it, bloody tendrils, but it falls away. And this thing that Hoyt assumed was a corpse in that moment looks at him, white eyes that have been burned white, lidless, no lips, but it looks at him and smiles and then actually dies. And that is the end of Father Paul Duray. And it is just this heart-sick, terrible moment. The descriptions are so, the way Hoyt describes it is so emphatic. And I mean, number one, he's in pain because, needs the ultramorph, but just like, it's horrifying. It really is.
It's horrifying, guys. It's so horrifying.
Terrible.
It's actually interesting because you describing it is worse than listening to it. Like, you just feel the impact of like 7 years of pain and dying and burning and living, and his eyes are gone, and
and it slaps you as a reader, because I originally kind of believed Hoyt's version, like that he did it, he did the thing, it fell off, and he died quickly, painfully but quickly. And then it's not just like a year, 7 years dying and living and dying on a lightning tree.
It's incredible. It's horrific.
Well, you have to imagine at that point, in a weird, funny way, he did attain a weird sort of godhood. It's himself. It's because, I mean, imagine what the time perception must have been like to you could really explore that idea that he'd been in so much pain for so long. Like, how actually feeling are his nerve endings?
Well, okay, so that's what's interesting. We figure out about Father Hoyt, which is that he now has they call it a nematode at a couple points, which is why I call it that, on his chest. But painkillers are no longer working to keep the pain suppressed. He now has to have ultramorphine. So that's the other thing about this. It's not like your pain senses would ever get dulled. It would reset them so that the pain would get worse. You would always feel it.
And
for 7 years.
Yeah, so once Hoyt gets the ultramorph, that's when the consul takes off his shirt, realizes he's got it on his front, but then he turns Hoyt over and he's got one of these cruciforms on his back. And the consul knows without a doubt that this is Father Paul Duray's cross. And you're just left with that as a reader. Like, just left. And now, again, we know, as I said, Paul Duray had a pretty solid theory that when you got two, someone's going to pop up at some point. And so that's how the priest's tale ends. He ends up taking Hoyt back to the ship, and they go down to Hyperion. And that's the priest's tale.
Man, what a crazy ride.
It's a doozy, man.
Especially, again, after having read that horror anthology with Katie. Like, Jesus, this is so much more affecting. And it's interesting because it's a very sort of classic setup of the priest going to be with a native tribe, but they're not native in this case, which I think he's trying to sidestep some of the problematicness of that, and I don't know how effective that is. But even at one point hangs a lampshade on, like, oh God, I hope this isn't one of those times for those stories I read where where the natives try to see if Christianity is real by killing the priest and seeing if he comes back, which is funny because I read that short story in some sci-fi anthology like years back. And then it gets so much worse. It gets so much worse.
Honestly, more horrifying than the tree scene is the concept that while he was still alive and before he had been given the cruciform, upon looking in hindsight, you realize all those villagers or the Bakura, they're all just small like fungal extensions of some other thing, and they're not really people. And he was alone that whole time with this alien fungal, like the thing. Just think about like a low key, chill, like the thing. And that's what you're living with for several, like, I don't know, whatever.
It's terrifying.
And what's weird too is that, like, I don't think we're gonna get more information about it in the next 5 stories. Like, it's just left as
Nope.
this, like, unsettling.
I can answer that now.
I went up and looked up some of the lore from Hyperion, and I knew it from before too, so I kind of know where that plotline goes eventually, but, like, it's not gonna come up again in this book, and that's so creepy. It's just, like, this weird, and it gives you this sense of, like, this is a large, scary universe or planet, and, like, there's a lot of just different weird things going on with it. I cannot say enough how much I enjoyed it. I wish you had told me that it was going to be that depressing, because then I would have read it at the end of the day instead of at the beginning, where I then had to have it in my head all day long. But rather than that, I thought it was really good.
I wanted you guys to go in as blind as, because I read nothing going into this. I had no prep, and I was literally, and I've told Will and Katie this both, but reading this, it was audiobook, of course, and I was driving down like a 4-hour drive to go visit my family, and it's me in the car. Like, normally I'm like a chill driver, like back here, and it's me gripping the steering wheel like this as the tension builds, being like, DeRay, you gotta put these things together. And just like, and then when that moment he's on the tree and I'm like, I don't know how I didn't crash into something. It was an easy drive, but man, for me, I had a very similar experience to Will, where it just sat with me. The good thing was I immediately read into the next story, which really, in between all the stories, there's stuff happening in the main plot. So it kind of tempers that a little bit, but it is an obscenely strong start. And when I finished this, I went, Simmons, how are you going to follow this?
See, I had the joy of stopping the audiobook right after the initial part of the story from Hoyt. And so I thought, oh, that's the end, la-di-day. And I moved on. And next, like 2 days later, I was playing it because I figured I'd get a head start. And I was like, oh, there's more. And then it was like,
oh my gosh.
Oh, and then it really, but you know what? In a more like interesting way, it really helps bring out a different flavor in the horror of the secret, because it really gave me the perspective of all the other characters and their ignorance, and then the horrible secret of the horrific, like,
yeah.
moment. You know what I mean? The Ari Aster screaming moment.
That is hysterical. I didn't realize.
What's funny is when I finished the original part, I was like, this isn't it. Like, I know this is not, I know there's got to be something more going on. So I was like, all right, I'll listen to the next part, but I'm not sure. I'll ask Maria. And then once that part finished, I was like, all right, now we're
done. This is.
Oh, that's hysterical. That's so funny.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was reading some stuff today, some threads about people reacting to this tale. And a lot of people have, what their favorite tale is. And one of the reasons I'm most excited to take you guys on this journey is to see what your ranking is. Because I have my ranking. I'm pretty solid, pretty happy with it. And it was interesting comparing mine to all these people, because someone was like, how do you follow the priest's tale? And then all these people were like, no, this one's better, this one's better. And some people are like, no, the priest's tale is the best. And it was interesting seeing the reactions and seeing the ones that like matched mine overall. And I am super pumped for getting to that, because each one, and I'll tell this to the listeners, because we end up with a lot of people who don't actually read the books that we're reviewing, but they just watch our videos.
Apparently.
Each tale has a slightly different genre flavor to it. So this one is obviously,
as you might imagine, is horror.
Yeah. Group of horror. And
actually, this was the rom-com one. Joke's on you. Have you ever felt lonely in life? Do you want a nematode for your own?
That is a hysterical retell. So the next one we're reading is The Soldier's Tale, which is General Fedbon Kassad's tale, and I'm excited to see what they think about it. Guys, do you have anything else to say about?
Yeah. Look, can I give them like a little foreshadowing for the next tale?
Ooh, have you started it?
Yes. Balls, lots of jiggling, slapping, balls. Yeah, in that next chapter, get ready for it.
I do not know what she's talking about. I might realize it when I started, but I do not.
I think you're forgetting the majority of the first 5 pages.
When his story actually starts, or while they're traveling to Hyperion?
No, when his story starts.
I might.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it them playing ball, like as kids?
No, they're Fenmon Prasad, right? The soldier.
The soldier, yeah. The girls. Oh. Hey, I forgot that's how it. I forgot how that started. I forgot that's how it started.
Look, as long as there's no nematodes, I'm good. I'm there for it.
Wait. For the cold thing,
The cold open.
we should try out all 3 of us intoning "We Are of the Crucible" or something like that to that effect.
Of the cross.
I don't want to.
Why? It's
It's
so.
too I genuinely am affected by that
No,
story.
he literally had a very visceral reaction to it. So
I was washing dishes when it happened, so it didn't hit me as hard. I don't think.
I think I was playing Destiny, but it's still pretty bad. Overall, I think I've said everything I wanted to about it. I think it's a great story. I'm really excited to read the next couple, and especially if they're not horrifying. And that's gonna be it for us. We will see you next time around. Do you have a creepy outro this time, Katie? We can use.
What do you mean a creepy outro? Okay,
You
fine.
did last
Give me a
time,
second.
remember?
Give me a second.
What is happening? What is she doing? Now I'm kind of scared.
I genuinely
I'm
don't
genuinely terrified. What is Katie doing? Guys, I don't know. This is terrifying. We're in this with you.
Where did Katie go?
I don't know, but she's gonna pop back in and we're gonna freak out. I'm just worried.
Oh, you're right. She's probably coming in from the window or something.
I don't know, but I'm so ready to die. Oh no. Oh wow, it's black.
She is going way too hard with this.
She's trying to fight. We're keeping this. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to cut my laughs.
No, I'm keeping the laughing part. That's what's hilarious.
I'm so loud.
Katie, what are you
What are you doing? She doesn't have her headphones. She can't hear us. This is the greatest thing I've ever had. Oh, Jesus.
This is easily the weirdest thing.
Is that creepy?
Yeah.
If we played the right music and you took me and Will dying of laughter out of it, yes. The creepiest part was you suddenly being in the doorway, in the frame again, just black. Because, we couldn't see your feet. It was just black.
All right. We will see you all next time. Peace out.
Bye, guys.
Or not me, maybe never.
You will.
Bye.
You will if you already started reading the next book.
Look, I even drew a picture of Father Duray.
Oh, man.
How did you not share this before now?
Why did you not bring this up earlier? Katie, that's great.
That's very good.
Thanks. That's what he looked like.
Bye, guys.
Bye.